Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are, and welcome to the latest in the Russo-British Chamber of Commerce webinar series. I'd like to start by thanking the Raven Property Group for sponsoring this webinar series. Today's topic for discussion is the specifics of searching, hiring, onboarding, and managing remotely. This has obviously become a subject of huge importance over the last few months. My name's Alf Torrance. I'm the Executive Director of the RBCC, and today's expert panel is from Red Square International, a London-based recruitment company which specializes in IT and tech and placements of Russian-speaking professionals. I'm delighted to welcome longtime supporter and friend of the Chamber, Nia Sheremetova, who's the CEO, and Svetlana Elfimova, a business psychologist and head of organizational development at Red Square International. We're very grateful to you both for taking time to join us today. Thank you, as always, to the RBCC members and friends as well for taking time out to participate. Before we get started, the usual ground rules on how today's event will run. Once I've finished, Nia and Svetlana will make a presentation. I'm sure many of you will have lots of questions to put to Svetlana and Nia. And as always, the best way to do that is one of two choices. You can use the hands up function on the Zoom app or use the chat room function, which is usually the best way to get your answers heard. Myself and the RBCC team will be monitoring the chat room throughout, and we'll try and pick out the more popular themes. As always, please keep your questions succinct, and it'll be very helpful if you type in your name and company on the Zoom identification tag. If you can't do that, please include them with your questions. Remember to keep yourself on mute. Obviously, when you're asking the question, unmute yourself, but most importantly, remute yourself once you've finished talking to prevent the echo. As usual, we will post the webinar on the website after the event, and Nia has very kindly agreed to have the presentation available should you wish as well. Nia, this has been an extraordinary time for business. Even with the gradual lifting of lockdown measures, many professionals, especially in your chosen field of IT and tech, are opting to continue to work remotely. What are the challenges and opportunities this situation is presenting Red Square International?
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Definitely nowadays we have to leap into the future. It was coming, but it just came so much faster than we ever expected. So remote work, isn't it a little frightening? I most certainly felt this way about 4 years ago when we did major rebranding and restructuring within our team, and we became a semi-remote team. And as Seth Godin very wisely put, if it scares you, it might be a really good thing to try. So today, hopefully, I will give you some very useful tools how to do it efficiently, how to minimize the risk associated with hiring remote personnel. And we will talk about why remote work is so popular. I'll give you a step-by-step guide into how to hire effectively. We'll talk about the preparation. We will talk about identifying units. We will touch on legislation for self-employed personnel in Moscow, in Russia, and in the UK. I will give you some tips where to search, how to do it effectively, how to adjust your interviewing techniques in order to make sure that you gain the right people on board, how you evaluate the candidates. Later, we will talk about risks associated with remote work and how to find solutions to minimize them. And last but not the least, Svetlana will take over and will talk about onboarding and managing remote personnel in the most efficient manner. So why remote work is so popular, COVID-19 aside, it is becoming a trend and definitely here to stay. Well, firstly, because a lot of people actually prefer to work remotely nowadays, because they can manage their work-life balance. I personally found it very liberating when I could take a few days from work and just work from home. I found out that my concentration level was better. I could manage some home-related tasks. Definitely the preference is there. And some candidates who are very highly qualified, very capable, they actually search for remote work. So in order to get them on board, you have to be able to offer this option nowadays. For example, we can see this trend in IT. It is a very candidate-driven market. The best candidates, they do require remote work and they actually demand it from their recruiters. Secondly, remote work can allow us to have more diversity within our teams, which ensures better creativity, better ideas flowing. Actually, by CAPD, you know, they've done a lot of research in this area, and diversity directly affects the profit margins. So, you know, don't we want a better profit margin by generating those unusual ideas from our unusual team? Why not? It allows inclusiveness as well, and to tap into that new age talent, not going very far, the millennials. You know, some of them are very good specialists within new age marketing. Everything is changing. We have to change with the age. And some of those talents, they might be resigning in Bali, and the only way to get them on board and to get their talent on board, actually to offer them remote opportunities. Also, in regards to inclusiveness, I give a very good example. We work with one law firm advisory, and they prefer to hire for their research teams for those lengthy litigation processes, so-called genius researchers. What they mean by that, people on a spectrum of autism, because of their systematic abilities, their performance within this task is genius, as they call it. Microsoft recently announced that they're welcoming these people on board. And I do think that inclusiveness is so important, again, to tap into that talent and to perform some tasks with so much more efficiency. As for me, remote team came with a lot of financial benefits. We wanted to grow our team, but we didn't want to give our arm and leg for it. You know, the real estate expensive in the UK, here in London, in Moscow as well. So first of all, hiring a part of our team remotely allowed us to cut the costs on the office space, and this is some significant cost we're talking about, while still growing our team. When you hire remotely, you could also really tap into market which is suitable for your specific budget. Maybe you don't have a full-blown up budget for a full hire, so you can think of a few options and bring somebody, still growing your team, still developing your expertise, but playing with your budget and staying within it, and it's very important. Also, remote personnel usually is quite effective, and they have a high level of expertise. But at the same time, they're much more willing to take, you know, to negotiate their salary remunerations for remote option. So that could be possibly, for some companies, the only way to tap into that talent and to get them on board. And since we went semi-remote, I've never looked back. Definitely, it's a way forward for us, and I think for many, many companies, especially nowadays. Also, remote work allows you to advance your management systems. Again, you have to leap into the future, and to do that, to manage your remote team effectively, you have to adjust your processes within the company. And nowadays, there are so many possibilities to do that and to become a more efficient manager, more efficient management team, and to advance your processes within the company. Hopefully, I managed to convince you that it is a way forward for many. And necessity nowadays. How to hire remotely and to do it in an effective manner. I will give you now a step-by-step guide. Firstly, before you make a decision to hire remotely, I would advise to analyze, really to take time to analyze your business processes and to identify your needs. First question you need to ask yourself, what are we doing it for? The most on-demand remote jobs at the moment are most certainly within IT industry, marketing. As I said, it's a whole new age marketing nowadays. To get that talent, you do need to offer remote opportunities. Accountancy, our accountant is based in Pakistan, and it works amazingly well. So you can think of those options for your team. Legal, law firms and legal roles, they're definitely moving in this direction, especially for those research positions. Editors, translators, analysts, all these kind of roles, they can be very effectively done on a remote basis. So identify within your team what can be outsourced remotely. Next, I would advise to think and create very clear specifications of a remote job. You know, I came up with a certain criteria what you need to comply with in order for this job to be as effective as possible. If you're thinking to hire remotely, firstly, I would try to analyze if this role is suitable for remote work. Does it have the necessary amount of self-sufficiency within the job description? Saying that, lately we've been a bit brave and we are hiring an intern remotely. We use careerup.com website. It's a Canadian internship program. Again, for example, for a role like this, of course, you would need a lot more guidance to get these people on board. But again, this is something you can decide within your team and maybe allocate a person who will give that necessary guidance, and you can allocate those tasks, maybe a bit less popular within your team, database search, editing, etc., to this kind of personnel as well. So it's not only for extremely self-sufficient and experienced roles, but you can really think outside the box and see how you can integrate it within your team. Secondly, I would advise to really analyze all the tools you have within your team, the technical tools in order for this role, for those tools to be accessed on a remote basis, but in a very comfortable and safe manner. If you do have a system like this IT system in place, that's great. If you don't, maybe you can take certain steps to bring it to a necessary level. Maybe you can hire an IT consultant, maybe you can hire an IT company which can do it for you. We did hire 4 years ago an IT consultant for our team, and that was probably one of the most effective decisions I've ever made. Just life became so much easier, and we weren't that afraid of pandemic as well, because we have that backup, systems backup. Then I would advise to really think about the performance measuring tools you can have for this role. You know, those KPIs. Maybe it's necessary to implement a new management system. Maybe your current management system can cope with it. And, you know, they have to be, in order to be effective, they have to be very clear, they have to be measurable, and they have to be achievable. And if you don't have an effective management system in place to measure those key performance indicators, I would definitely advise to bring one into the team. And to do that, I gave on my presentation, here we go, I gave in the presentation a few suggestions for the management teams. But what I would advise the most, to test them first, maybe do a test run. All of them, they offer weekly, maybe even monthly test runs, because a system which is suitable for one organization might not be suitable for you. So in order really to make the best decision possible, to get the best system for your team, for your needs on board, I would advise to test them for a period of time, test a few, choose the best one. And of course, with those systems, you can decide on some of them. There could be specific industry-related ones, and they're the best. For example, for us, our system is a recruitment system. It integrates the whole process very efficiently, and definitely it works wonders for us. But you can think what systems are available within your industry, or maybe a simple small business management system could be a more efficient option for you. So then we would talk, and we would need to think about the budget in place and the payment structure. If you hire somebody on your market, for example, in the UK, if you want to bring somebody in the UK, you need to decide first, do you want them fully on board full-time on permanent basis, or maybe other options could be more suitable. And in terms of remote personnel, you could bring them self-employed as well. For example, you know, if maybe you are not fully ready to commit to full-time on your books position, you can offer a self-employed option for the candidates. It could be on a part-time basis, or it could be on a contract basis when you have a limited time for your project, and you know, you have a certain time frame to deliver it. It's very convenient, for example, for IT projects, for, you know, deadline projects where you need those expertise, but for a certain period of time. And here we need to talk about the self-employed option. If you hire somebody based in the UK for a project based in the UK, and you want to bring them on a maybe part-time basis or on a contract basis, and it's a self-employed option you are looking for, you need to remember that these people can be brought as self-employed only if the invoices they send to you are no more than 70% of all invoices they generate. So it has to be like a small business, and 30% of those invoices has to be from somewhere else. That's the law in the UK. So maybe it makes sense to bring them on a part-time basis. If you bring them on a full-time basis as a contractor, let's say for 6 months, they potentially can generate those 30% diversity of the invoices within the other 6 months. So that could be also an option for you. It is very convenient, and it allows you to get those expertise and bring them on board. If you are hiring maybe a contractor, or maybe even a full-time employee, but you hire them, let's say, in Russia or in the countries of CIS. If you don't have a legal entity in Russia, you are not allowed to get them on your books, because they, you know, it's against the law in Russia as an individual to get paid in international currencies. Saying that, you won't need to, because a lot of experts who work with international companies, they all have a self-employed setup. In Russia, it's called EEP, Индивидуальный предприниматель, or in English, it would be individual entrepreneur scheme. So they don't have this law that their invoices have to be diversified and they have to have a certain percentage coming from one company and some from others. So you can actually hire them full-time, completely be dedicated to your project, and they still can be self-employed. And that's very convenient for international companies, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't know, those of you who speak to Russian candidates, you probably noticed that when they say, you know, what salary expectations they have, they always say number in monthly net figure, and it's always net. So you have to always think that there is a tax on top, not like in the UK, we say yearly gross. But for those Russian self-employed EP candidates, their tax is only 6%. So whatever figure they say, you add only 6% on top of it, and probably they would expect you to contribute to that as well. Saying that for some IT roles, development roles, there are even grants in certain regions of Russia, which, you know, it allows them not to pay any tax. So you can ask them if they have that grant, and you even save on that 6%, but it's not that much. So it's very efficient hire to hire somebody in Russia in CS on a self-employed basis, and to pay them salary, which probably would be very you know, I mean, in Russia, in Moscow, some salaries are quite high at the moment, but you can tap into regions and you can really find somebody absolutely amazing for your budget. And when you think about taxes, it's only 6% on top. So that could be food for thought. I also advise, in the UK we have, it's not a law, but we have an advice from the government. When you hire somebody on a temporary basis, on a contract basis, they advise to contribute to their holiday pay, because this, you know, usually when a person is on your books, they do get holiday allowance, but temporary personnel, they usually don't get that. And I advise as an incentive, as a good benefit to offer to your remote workers, to offer that holiday pay for them on top of their salary. And currently it stands at 10%. That's a great incentive to offer, and to, you know, to show that you care, and to make sure that they choose to work for you. Okay, going forward. Step number 3, decide on your recruitment tools. Where do you search for remote candidates? Of course, you can advertise, and I gave some options where you can place your adverts and try to get those candidates to apply. If you would like to take the search into your own hands, you can use a few database searches and maybe allocate the person within your team who can do that. And again, I gave you some options for various roles, and a few of those websites, for example, People Per Hour or Transfermify, they have a very advanced paying system as well. So you might actually consider paying maybe those temporary remote workers via this system. And it's a very efficient tool and very effective safety net for you as a company, and for those people who get to start to work maybe on a temporary remote basis. And of course, if you wouldn't like the hassle of the search, or maybe don't have the necessary tools within your team, or maybe a spare hand to you know, who can do that, you could hire a recruitment agency. And all I want to say here, that it could be a quick quality results, and recruitment actually saves money. A lot of people think otherwise, but just for a second, think if you would have to spend a lot of people hours on those searches, going through hundreds of CVs, you know, trying to choose that particular one. Imagine about the people hours. Time is money. Maybe they can do better things during that time. When you add all those little costs, into the account, you actually end up spending more money not hiring a recruitment agency. So just a bit of a food for thought. And I also wanted to stress out here that sometimes within your own team, you have those amazing personnel, and maybe their circumstances change. Maybe they move abroad or far away, and they want to leave. Think maybe you can keep them on a remote basis. It is very easy to do because you already trust them, you already know how they work, what they do, and maybe you can keep your talent within your team and just transfer them to be remote. Okay, step number 4, evaluating candidates' profiles, designing your selection process. And here it's very important to talk about key indicators of suitability. So when you go through hundreds of CVs, you know, you want this process to be very efficient. So decide beforehand what are key indicators for you for that candidate who applies to be suitable. Some of those key indicators could be on a low level, medium level, or maybe high level. And it's very important to think which qualities you could potentially compromise on, and which qualities you absolutely can't, because you have to be flexible when you hire. Sometimes it's about the person as well as about their expertise. And if you identify those indicators in advance, the process will be faster and smoother for you. Also, when we move to step 5, you're interviewing. Of course, I'm listing some interviewing tools. There are some very advanced systems to do an online conference interview, but these are just the basic ones we all currently use, and I think they work just fine. In order to interview remote personnel before you hire them, you need to adjust your interviewing process as well. Why? I'll tell you why. Because you need to make sure that these candidates, their competencies and their personal qualities allow them to be very autonomous, self-motivated, competent with high level of expertise within their field, self-disciplined, very result-driven, and highly organized. In order to find out if the person can fit that criteria, I suggest to use a competency framework, or we call it STAR, when you interview them. The thing is that our past behaviors dictate how we're going to perform in our future tasks. And as the interviewer, you have this option to find out more about the candidate's past behaviors to see if they're suitable behaviors for your organization. So using the STAR model, you phrase your questions, you know, starting from finding out about certain situations, maybe reading it from the CV, asking a very open question, you know, what the situation was about, what the task was about. Then you talk about the task, and here you need to identify the level of their responsibilities. For example, if somebody says we at the interview, you don't really get the clear guidance. So what that specific candidate actually did, because he always talks we, what was his specific role within that project. And again, asking open questions, you can identify their specific tasks and level of responsibility. Then we talk about action. So what actions did they actually take to address that situation, and as the result, what was their achievement at the end? What did they achieve, and what kind of a learning curve it was for them? What can they bring on board after that? Also, when you are conducting those interviews and you see those great candidates who are interviewing and you would like to bring them on board, I advise to sell your company, I call it as well, because it always goes both ways. Not only you are choosing them, but they're choosing you as well. And high quality professionals, they usually go for many interviews at the same time, and they probably will end up with a few contradicting offers, and you want them to choose you if you've chosen them. So I always say sell your company, make sure that your interview is professional, that you are prepared, that you give them the necessary attention, that you showcase that you're interested in their expertise. All those little things, sometimes they get overlooked by interviewer. I even wrote an article 1 year ago, you know, the 8 mistakes interviewers make at the interview. It's usually all about interviewees, but actually as an interviewer, you have to be very professional at the interview in order to get those expertise on board, because the biggest disappointment when you find that person you want on board if they take another offer. And I'm not even talking about you know, the wasted time and money on finding them. So now I would like to move into the risks of hiring remote team and how to overcome them. And first opinion, I always hear that we are worried to hire remotely because we don't think that they will work as hard as people in the office. Well, first of all, with the new age, I advise you to rethink of what working hard means for you. Because head down 9 to 6, it's not efficient anymore. It's scientifically proven that it's not the best possible way to deliver great results. And shorter outbursts of very efficient work practice give much better results for the person, for the company. I always say that working from home, it gives you very high level of concentration. Think Bill Gates. He takes those brain breaks for a week every month on his lovely lake, quiet place. Similar benefits apply to those who work from home. And, you know, Bill Gates, he did well for himself, so it definitely works. The next solution, it's those, again, I'm bringing your attention to this very clear KPIs, very clearly communicated and stated expectations, and measurable performance tools. They're extremely important when we're talking about remote work, and they have to be communicated very well. The second opinion I hear, it is difficult to monitor working hours of these people, and a lot of employees worried about that. So a few solutions I can suggest. First of all, when you're choosing the person, be wise. Choose a person who you feel you can trust. It's very important. I mean, it's only normal within our normal interview and practice, but it makes even more sense when you hire someone remotely. Just make sure that, you know, they showcase those qualities like trustworthiness, responsible attitude. And the next suggestion would be, you know, I love this phrase. People say, people hate bosses, but they absolutely adore their leaders. Also, if you can lead by example, nothing guarantees that your personnel will be completely transparent with you if you lead from the front, and if you become a key figure for them to look up to, and then you don't have to worry about trusting them. They will, and they will do it with smile on their faces. Solution number 2. There are some management systems which offer an opportunity of login, monitoring logins. So if you would like to keep a bit more control on their hourly output, you could implement a system which has that option. Maybe it could be a good solution for you. And solution number 3, my favorite, result-oriented payment system. you don't have to hire your personnel on per hour work unless you absolutely want to, and it's a good option. But for example, within certain projects, you know, even with our accountant, we created a system because it's very easy to deliver certain tasks on a certain time for so many jobs, and you can actually create a payment system which is there, and it's, you know, the amounts are payable upon results, and it works very well. You don't care how many hours they spend as long as you get the result you want. Very efficient. Another worry, information confidentiality, and here I'll touch very briefly. First of all, before you even start the interviewing process, if you have to expose some information to the candidate, sign that NDA. At least you will be protected. Solution number 2, clear written rules of use for all employees to comply with. Sometimes people don't know if they're allowed to enter certain website from their working computer. So it's better, you know, or they are not allowed what they're allowed, what information they're allowed to access or not. I advise in a written form for everybody to know the safety and security rules for using your systems and how to do it in a very safe manner for them and for you as an employer. And solution number 3, secured online platform. This is something we have in place for us. For example, we do provide our remote employees with the company computer, which is set up with our system. So if any undesirable activity is detected, the management is able to see it right away. The IT person sees it right away and can inform the management. And in that case, you know, any surprises won't be there because you do have a good IT setup in place. Probation, of course, we all sometimes rely on probation, but I don't advise to do that. Try to make sure that you hire the right person from the very beginning. Maybe you can lengthen the interview process sometimes. Maybe you can come up with a certain task for them. Maybe you can give a trial run. But when you bring them on board, when you already spend your time, spend so much money on getting them on board, the last thing you want for them not to pass the probation. And you can do something about it. And first of all, from the very beginning, I advise to have very clear communication structure. It minimizes those dropouts, which you don't want to happen. And last but not the least, absolutely quality onboarding. And on this wonderful note, I am passing it to Svetlana Elfimova, a colleague of mine, who will tell you a bit more how quality onboarding can minimize your risks of losing somebody at the probation period.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here today. Let me just share my screen as well. Continue 1 second.
I can
yeah, you can help me.
No
okay.
problem.
Okay, lovely. So we're going to talk today about onboarding remote employees, just to logically continue what Nia has been talking about. I'll cover preparation, induction, training, management, and adaptation, but really briefly. And if you're going to have a question, feel free to approach me after the webinar. So what is onboarding? Onboarding is simply welcoming and integrating a new hire into the company. It's more than just orientation. It's not just to show around where the bathroom is and where the kitchen is, especially when we are talking about remote employees. So it's a process, and the best practice is to have 90 days of onboarding program. So when you're designing, consider things that I'm going to talk about today. So proper onboarding influences the way people are going to perform. It influences the way how long they're going to stay with the company. It influences employer brand and whether they're going to be an ambassador of your company in the future. It's also influenced their presenteeism, whether people going to fake that they're working and just sitting there for a number of hours and not doing anything. So you want to be really prepared for a new hire to join the company. And when I say prepared, what that means is when person signs the job offer, you do send them upfront information about the company, about the what the first day of work is going to look like, what is on the agenda. You want to have the software and the accounts and the email be ready and document signed already. You want to introduce the person before he even or she begins the first day to introduce the team. Inform your team that their new hire is joining, what is his or her name, and when they're joining the company, so they can receive this welcome note even before they start their work. And that will make them feel welcomed and that the company is prepared and looking forward to working with them. According to CIPD, companies that do structured and standardized onboarding, they have employees that perform 54% better than those that don't have onboarding program in place. So upfront information, as I said already, and make sure on the first day you schedule one-to-one meeting with the line manager, the new hire and the line manager, and also have a video conference with the team where everybody can introduce themselves. It's important to point out to these key stakeholders who are the leaders in the company and what is everyone is doing. However, make sure not to overload a new hire with the information because it might be super overwhelming for them. They already have a high level of anxiety. They have quite a lot of misunderstanding problem at the beginning. They really need to take this time to learn a lot more about the company, the way you work, the communication channels, about people, and about the way you manage and what is the culture is like. So during this period, for the first 3 months, person really understands and whether it's a good fit, why we see people dropping out during the probation period. However, if we kind of revise how we see those first 3 months from having a probation period, actually doing it onboarding period, kind of smooth them into the company and see whether you both fit each other very well. So, and the next thing I'm talking about, after we have prepared, we have the first induction week. So the first day, be super friendly, introduce everyone in the team on a video call because we are talking about remote hiring. Update the person on current stage of the project and where the company is at the moment. What are you working on? What is the bigger picture? And how his or her work is going to contribute into this bigger picture. So we want to make sure that they are aware where they are sitting with their work. During the induction week, and that's where we provide initial training, make sure to video record all the trainings, or when the person asking a question, just record it, label and save it in a place like Google Drive and so on, where a person can actually access it independently, and that will help you not to answer the same question all over again. Also good practice to organize shadowing, even using Zoom, and to work together with one of the senior employees, with someone who's been in the company for a while and knows about the project. So shadowing and working buddies is a very good idea, so people can approach them straight away and ask the questions. Not only it's important to familiarize people with what their role is like and to provide that clear structure, what is expected from them, what is the result. It's important to share articles and other materials about the culture of the company and what are the company's values and what are the mission, what is the what are you doing in this company, like what are you trying to achieve and who are your customers. And when you have that data prepared for people, they can familiarize themselves with that on their free time. So we're going to the next slide, please. Okay, onboarding itself, one second. Yeah, onboarding. As I said before, it might take about 19 days, and make sure the information is up to date and all your training materials are ready. That I've mentioned already. So make sure people start to get to know each other. In some companies that are fully distributed, that's something I'm really fascinated. Those companies that never had offices before, they don't have a headquarter, they only work remotely. They have this funny questionnaire, but personal questions. What pisses you off? Like, what do you like the most? What motivates you in life? What is your favorite movie? And they have this questionnaire shared with everyone in the company, so that person who joins can actually read those questionnaires and answers of other people and learn more on a personal level, and that improves the sense of belonging. You start to understand who you work with, how you fit in, and so on. So we've spoken about shadowing and working bodies already. So make sure you have regular check-ins. Avoid micromanagement. You don't want to check every single step, but have clear expectations and results. If a similar project has been delivered before by someone else, show that to this person so he or she has some solid information, an example of your standards and what type of delivery is expected from the new hire. So managing, set expectations, as I mentioned before, have a system in place before you hire or you start growing a remote team. So you want to at least to have a spreadsheet with the tasks, who is responsible for the task and when is the due date. That will help your new hire also to see the results, to see those milestones that actually, even through the first week, I have done already quite a lot. And that really helps to kind of congratulate the new hire on the achievements on the early stage. Establish two-way communication. So it's not only up, down, but two-way communication. When is convenient for you to talk? If we are talking about line manager or just manager, managing director, what is your preferable way to communicate and time slots to communicate? Provide regular feedback sessions. Even at the early stage, it's super important to have regular feedback sessions. Some companies that I used to work with, they have 3 months coaching system in place, coaching course. Not a course, but just like 3 months onboarding, and that's a possibility for a person to have a chat, but also to look into the solutions and see where's the problems, where's the developmental areas, what else one has not understand yet properly, and what are the pathways to resolve that. So regular feedback, consistency and follow-up is super important as well. And let's go to the next one. Actually, for the first week, you're going to have a checklist with goals and actionable items. And that's also something visual for the person to help. So adaptation and psychological well-being. Why is it important to actually create onboarding program and have it on place? Because people, when they join an organization, depends on the personality and their circumstances and their environment, but they may feel high level of anxiety on a psychological level. And that, of course, influences the way they perform. As an employer, we expect people to perform straight away. We hired someone amazing with a great experience, but what's going on? Why they're not performing that well straight away? So that's what's happening. And the structural communication and understanding how everything is being built in the company, who is responsible for this, for who can help and support a new hire, who he or she can approach, that really helps to ease that anxiety level and lower it. So we should remind ourselves and the new hire, it's a learning period. The first few months is a learning period, and it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay from us to guide and offer that support and assistance. So if we create that warm environment for people, they are feeling more engaged, and their level of job satisfaction is a lot higher. So, and that also influences the way they're going to collaborate with others, engage with the team, and work in the team together. So make sure to have catch up, like regular catch up, just to have a social chat. That's super important. We all care about our performance and results and delivery, but it's also important to have a talk and learn about each other. So that's called get to know your time. Yeah, okay. So organizational processes have to be in place. My very last point, clear guidelines and policies for everyone in the company have to be the same, and probably a little bit adjusted for those who are working remotely where applicable. We want to ensure quality and diversity, and we need to evaluate working conditions of that person. Sometimes we may need to shift extra equipment and think about who's doing it in your company and how you're going to evaluate, as well as risk assessment, psychological and physical, how that person is sitting. Is he like kind of arching and working like that, or is it a good working space and work condition that actually contributes and improves their well-being? All right, so software and emails, of course, have to be prepared for that. And I said about risk assessment. So that's all from me. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Nia and Svetlana, thank you very, very much for a fascinating insight into the world of remote HR and managing your team. We've got one question on the board. I'm not sure if you received any beforehand, but if you don't mind, I'll just kick off.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to ask you your thoughts on generating team spirit, because my sort of my worry about remote is the fact that you can't pick up all those subtle, signals, body language, moods that you do within an instant of walking into an office. In my sort of my experience, you just can't do that in the same way online. I'd be very interested to hear your views on that, and whether you've got any tips on how you can actually replicate that remotely.
Well, that could be a good thing, because what we can see in remote teams that almost never, or maybe extremely rarely, you would have an argument. So, but it is definitely an issue to deal with. If, first of all, clear communication, and it's so important just to ask the person, and not about only, have you performed well with that, and have you delivered on that project, but actually to ask, how are you? Just human basic interaction, just to ask them to share how they feel, and to keep the spirits up. I'll tell you what we, for example, have done during the pandemic, because that was my worry as well. Not only I had to keep my spirits up, I had to keep my team's spirits up. We did a few sessions of yoga together. And little things like this to show that you care. So you can do little sessions of yoga. Actually, we used the company, Svetlana is a part of it, We Well, and they actually do corporate retreats, and they do it remotely very nicely. Extremely useful tools as well, not just to have a laugh, actually very useful tools. And then also I've done sometimes a few sessions when we just have a tea, when we just sit together, how we would say it maybe in the office, maybe go for a lunch together on Fridays. So we try to recreate it remotely. And if you want to step it up, have a glass of wine together. And or, for example, I've created this game with my sons when we ask very exciting questions about people we know. And we, of course, did it on the members of our family first and had a great laugh. Questions like, if father was an animal, which animal would he be? In that kind of, or if you had all money in the world, what kind of present would you give him? And I decided to play that game with my team. And that was a great team bonding experience as well, and just an opportunity also to find out a bit more about each other. And that would keep the spirits up, that would keep that positive attitude. But usually as a manager, if something is wrong or somebody not feeling that well, you feel it. Maybe they're not that keen to come for a Zoom team meeting, or maybe they're not answering the emails right away, or maybe you can't reach them for a while. Just give them a call and address the situation. Just say, are you okay? You know, is there something I can do? Is there something I can help you with? Especially in a situation when, you know, with the pandemic, we had to battle our worries. We had to you know, really bring it all together for each of us. And sometimes as a manager, just asking those questions, just listening to answers, and maybe coming up with a suggestion, with an idea that could resolve that situation before it escalates.
Right. Thanks. Okay, we don't have that much time left, unfortunately, so I'm going to ask you a double question, really. Firstly, and it's connected to the chemistry issue I just asked, and it's from Stuart Lawson asking, how do you handle firing people online? And then I'd like to add your views on how close you can get to generating a team spirit remotely as you would if you were in the office. So do you think you can get close to that? But firstly, I'm interested to hear your views on firing people remotely.
The same way you would fire a person within your normal circumstances. Definitely, you would need to have a procedure in place, HR procedure. It would start with a warning, maybe with the official warning, maybe make it 3. If it's not working from the first time, you would need to have maybe somebody in a meeting with those difficult talks with your employee, maybe your HR person or your or maybe just your colleague if you don't have an HR person, and you know, for them to join the meeting, and you have an official warning meeting where you very clearly and very professionally outline the issues you have with the person or their performance, and they have to make sense, they have to be logical, just so the person can really see you know, what you're not happy with, which those KPIs. So if you have those KPIs, those key performance indicators in place, you can rely on them to show systematically, you know, what has been going wrong for that person. And if it comes to that unfortunately after 1 or 2 meetings, these disciplinary meetings, things are not improving, you know, then you follow the legal procedure. You again, within that remote meeting, you outline your reasons. You write an official email. If you have a legal person within your team, do make them have a look. Actually, maybe somebody could use this information. I do have a company in place. It's called oh, just 1 second, my gosh, I can send that information. It's a HR advisory team and legal advisory team. You pay a monthly subscription to be a member. And if you have any issues, they basically guide you through all the processes all the way. And even if you have a lawsuit on your hands, there are lawyers who will represent you from that firm. And I think that's a brilliant idea. I'll definitely send this information, what they're called, and a contact name within the team. So if you want to secure yourself from any potential legal suits and you don't want to splash on, I mean, solicitors' costs if there is a dispute in the UK, could go into hundreds of thousands. And having that safety net, it's like insurance, but it's so much better. They advise you on HR. If you want to write the difficult email, difficult official letter that you're firing somebody, they would advise you how to do it correctly, etc. They advise you on health and safety. They advise you on HR issues. They advise you on the full legal processes if it comes to that. And having something like that as a safety net is extremely helpful. Saying that, if you do everything correctly from the very beginning, follow with official letters, with official processes, it has to be a warning meeting, it has to be probably a second one. It has to be very clearly outlined where the person is not performing, what are the reasons. They can't be personal, they have to be very statistical. And if you do everything correctly, even when you have to give that notice, even if you have to fire a person, and you do it kindly, but you do it also extremely legally, professionally, with all those key indicators outlined, you will be absolutely fine, and it will be a smoother process. And the second question was about
how close do you think you can replicate team spirit remotely? Do you think businesses can get close to where they were?
Yes, I do believe so. And I'll tell you why. I have a friend, she runs a completely remote team, scattered all around the world. What they do couple of times a year. They hire a lovely, maybe hotel or place, and they gather all together, and they have a laugh, and they have an amazing time together. And sometimes it could bring people even closer, because maybe when somebody is just moody or not in a good spirit, you don't have to deal with them right at that point because they're not in the office. But when you meet for meetings like this face to face, it could bring you so much closer together. And also, what I want to say again, if you have a manager who gives attention to the team, who constantly online, who could speak to them openly, if you have those wonderful team building events online or offline, I think the spirit of the remote team could be pretty high.
Great. Okay. Well, Nia and Svetlana, thank you both very much. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. There are a few more questions, but I'm sure you'd be happy to field those after the event.
Absolutely. If anybody would like to address any questions, here is our contact. You can see on the presentations. You're very welcome to address them directly. And if you want to have a chat or have our opinion about any problems or projects you may have, we're very happy to answer all your questions.
Thank you. And as I said, Nia and Svetlana have kindly agreed to post the presentation, and we'll also post a recording of today's webinar. I'd just like to finish by thanking our sponsors once more, Raven Property Group, for making this happen. And also I'd like to remind you, of our next webinar event, which is actually tomorrow already, in which we're discussing the future of Russia, UK, EU relationships. We have a fantastic panel again. Stuart Lawson, one of our very own, Georgi Caligari, very well-known businessman in Moscow, who's CEO and chairman of Generali. Annette Kiobe, who is the head of IMF in Russia. Vladimir Yakunin, chairman of DOC Research Institute, quite a well-known figure. And actually tomorrow will be moderated by Tom Blackwell, who's CEO of EM Communications, again, a very well-known business person out in Moscow. So please join us tomorrow. That's at 3 p.m. UK time, 5 p.m. Moscow. Very much look forward to seeing tomorrow. And thank you again for joining us today. Nia and Svetlana, once again, thank you very much. And good luck with that remote managing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.